We continue with our exploration of life lessons from the great books. And in this, our second section, we are exploring how great books inform the decisions we make at each stage of our life, from youth through old age, and how also at each stage of that life, we read these great books with new insights brought about by our own life experiences. And in our first one of these, in lecture number 7, we looked at the sufferings of the young Werther and drew from it the lesson, well, no matter how bad life seems, no matter how desperately you are in love, you should continue. As we close with Winston Churchill, as long as there is life, there is hope. And so the great Goethe, the author of the sufferings of the young Werther, lived on to great success. As I ended our lecture with, he was always embarrassed by the Werther that he had gained all this fame with such a melodramatic novel, but at one point he told his close confidant, someone who could write that book, Werther, when he was 24, wasn't a greenhorn, was he? And one day he was surprised when he got a note saying that, I am in town visiting with my daughter, and I would like to call upon you, Herr Goethe. And it was Lotte, the girl of his youth that he had almost committed suicide over. Charlotte Kessner, as her married name was. And she came. She explained to him she had been much embarrassed by this novel when he had published it. He had been most unthoughtful to put their love affair before the world. It had almost estranged her from her husband, and they still could not talk about it without angry words. But she was here to forgive him. He met her with the same stiff formality he met everybody with, and her revenge was to go back home and tell her children, I met an old man who used to be Wolfgang Goethe. So vengeance, that was her petty vengeance. And our second study in how we live our lives, reflecting again upon youth and the decisions that we make in youth, is the Hamlet of Shakespeare. Goethe was an enormous admirer of Shakespeare. He believed that Shakespeare was the most creative genius in world history, and it is only fair that world literature ranks Goethe and Shakespeare as the two preeminent geniuses, each in his own language. Goethe is to the German language what Shakespeare is to ours, and what Dante is to the Italian language. Goethe read the plays of Shakespeare over and over again, and one of his favorites was Hamlet, and this story of vengeance. And one of our life lessons that we review periodically as we go through life is, should you take revenge? How much time should you give pondering revenge? I find that it's the most difficult lesson for people to accept. Many people say they believe in the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and also returning good for evil. When you really try to practice it, they think you are deranged. That is why we have all our lawsuits. And if you were to tell an attorney, I'm just going to forgive this evil that is done to me by this malpractice in medicine, by returning good, giving a donation to that hospital, well, they would think you were deranged, would they not? Yes or no? Yes. And so Hamlet, the story of a youth who sets out on the path of vengeance, driven by the noblest of motives as he sees it to avenge his father. Shakespeare was at the height of his creative talents when Hamlet was produced, probably in 1600. Unlike Goethe, of whom we know so much and left us autobiographical studies, we know almost nothing of Shakespeare. And of course, there have been those who have questioned whether one man, particularly a man who wasn't from distinguished birth or didn't have a great education, it would seem, could write so much. But we have already seen with Albert Schweitzer and Albert Einstein how mediocre minds invariably hate genius. So Shakespeare is a genius, a man who wrote tragedies and comedies and tragedies without a lot of formal philosophy of the kind we might find in Goethe's Faust, but with the deepest understanding of human nature of any single author. And every play of Shakespeare is profound in its simple understanding of how people really operate, what their motives are, without going to religion, deep beliefs in God, but simply how do humans operate. And one of his central themes is jealousy and vengeance. These motives that drive far too many human concerns and actions. So our play takes place in Denmark. There were earlier legends about a Hamlet, but the great Shakespeare simply created this out of his genius, drawing upon a few little threads to give us this magnificent portrait. It begins on a cold night in Denmark in Elsinore Castle, where the king is in residence. The new king, Claudius, his brother having died. And he has married the wife of his brother, his own sister-in-law, Gertrude. And on this cold night, the watchmen of the guard are moving back and forth trying to stay warm, and suddenly they say, there it is again, the ghost. We've seen him before, and he always appears at the same time. He will say nothing to us. Speak to him, Horatio, for thou art a scholar. You have studied with Hamlet in Wittenberg in Germany. Speak to him in Latin. See if you will get a response. But the ghost moves on as the dawn begins to break. The king, his wife, his most trusted advisor, Polonius, are deep in conversation. For there's a threat to the royal power of Denmark in Fortinbras, Prince of Norway, whose land is now occupied by the Danes and who is believed to be raising an army to overthrow the power of Denmark. And believing that the tumultuous episode at the court in which the king died under mysterious circumstances and this new marriage has occurred will weaken Denmark. So they have serious matters of state to ponder. And the young prince, Hamlet, why did his father die so mysteriously? And why would his mother marry her brother-in-law so quickly? As he said, the meat that they cooked for the wake of my father could have been served the next day at their wedding feast. How could my mother have done such a thing? It is even incest to have married her brother-in-law like that. And then his friends tell him about the ghost. And he goes with them and walks, and the ghost appears to him. Come apart with me, the ghost finally speaks. You look just like Dad. I am your father. Armed as I was the day we conquered the Norwegians, but now a pale shade, doomed to wander the earth and suffer the torments until you have laid my soul to rest by avenging my death. It's a serious charge from your father, is it not? I will unlay for you how they killed me. Your uncle, my brother, found me in the garden where I take my accustomed nap. They said a serpent bit me, but he poured poison into my ear that turned my blood into gelatinous fluids, and I died. And my wife, your mother, was already engaged in an adulterous, incestuous affair with him, and together they took my life. I'll kill them both. No, leave your mother to heaven, but kill him. And so this knowledge is deep in the soul of Hamlet. And he has no doubt that it's not a figment of his mind. After all, his friends have also seen the ghost. It's a real ghost. Shakespeare's audience believed in ghosts. The Salem witch trials would happen long after Shakespeare, when witches could conjure up spirits. So this is a real creature, this ghost, the spirit of his father. But how to carry this out? How not to be seen to be plotting their vengeance? And Hamlet adopts the pose of having lost his mind under this grief. And from having been a scholar, he is turned into a distracted, distraught young person, blathering to himself. And so the old advisor Polonius, the new King Claudius, the mother Gertrude, who loves Hamlet deeply and is already feeling pangs of remorse over having married this man she had the affair with. They worry about him. They urge him not to go back and try to study in Wittenberg. He'll be too distracted. In the meantime, Polonius has his own family issues. His daughter Ophelia is much attracted to Hamlet, and his own son Laertes is about to go back to Paris to study more. And as he is sending Laertes, his son, off, Polonius gives him his advice. And one of the things about Shakespeare is his magnificent language. Remember how we have defined a great book? It has a great theme. It is written in noble language. It speaks across the ages. It speaks to each of us individually. Well, great language, noble language. Never has the English language reached such beautiful heights as in the hand of Shakespeare and the King James Version of the Bible. And they are very closely related. Shakespeare's language is the essence of what I mean by elevated speech that becomes part of your soul. So many of our ordinary phrases that we use on an everyday basis, that people who may never have read Shakespeare except in agony in high school, one play, use it. How many times have I been told, you are a real piece of work? Well, there in the Hamlet, what a piece of work is man. The lady doth protest too much. Time and time and again, the green-eyed monster that is jealousy. That is how memorable these phrases are. Or, as one of the guards says at the beginning, it is so quiet at Elsinore, not even a mouse is stirring. And so in one of these memorable statements, these memorable passages, Polonius gives some of the best advice on how to live your life that you will ever give, and we should read it. My blessing with thee, and these few precepts in thy memory. Look thou character. Give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act. Now ponder that as Hamlet goes through with some unproportioned acts. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. Those friends thou hast, and their adoption tried, grapple them unto thy soul with hoops of steel. Make good friends, keep them. But do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new-hatched, unfledged comrade. Don't undertake too many enterprises or get involved with too many people in their schemes. Beware of entrance to a quarrel. Don't get in a lawsuit, but being in, bear it that the opposed may beware of thee. In other words, you get in a fight, see it through to the end. Give every man thine ear, but few thy voice. Keep your own counsel. Take each man's censure, but reserve thy judgment. Listen to what everybody's saying about you and criticizing you, but you be spare in your criticism. Costly thy habit, as thy purse can buy, but not expressed in fancy, rich, not gaudy, for the apparel oft proclaims the man. And they in France of the best rank and station are of a most select and generous chief in that. No, I just read on a door posted in a career counseling bureau at the university. Dress for the job 2 steps up from what you want. In other words, if you want to be a dean, don't teach the way I do in some raggedy shirt, or like Albert Schweitzer with your clip-on bow tie, but dress in very expensive suits and a power tie. That's the way, or a power dress and power pearls. So dress, but make it refined, correct? Not a green leisure suit, but a nice Brooks Brothers blue striped suit. Neither a borrower nor a lender be, for a loan oft loses both itself and a friend. And borrowing dulleth edge of husbandry. Still good advice for all these people with credit card debt, don't you think? Yes or no? Absolutely. Or our own country. That too dulleth the edge of husbandry. But this above all, to thine own self be true. And it must follow, as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. That is my message always to my students. Yes, you should listen to your father, your mother, about law school, medical school, but ultimately, you choose in life what is your mission, your calling. Find it out, follow it, do what you love. It's all right there in Shakespeare, there in Hamlet. And so with these words of wisdom, and they are true words of wisdom, Laertes goes off to France, and the plot begins to thicken in Denmark, for there is something rotten in the state of Denmark. And Hamlet sets it upon himself to find out how to avenge his father. Laertes has also spoken with his sister, Ophelia, and she has told him that Hamlet is really interested in her, and he has warned her off. Hamlet is meant to be king over Denmark, and there will be other decisions that will enter into the wife he chooses. He will only break your heart, and moreover, I do not think he's a very constant fellow. I think he will only trifle with your affections. So as our brother, I tell you, spurn Hamlet. And so she does. She spurns his advances before he has turned into madness. But now he begins to act mad, and he is gibbering around the court and making all kinds of strange actions, jumping around, dressing in strange clothes. And Ophelia comes to the reasonable conclusion that she has driven him crazy. By not accepting his love, she has made him lovesick. Well, don't laugh. That's just like Werther, isn't he? Didn't he go crazy with love? And so Hamlet is now driven crazy by love. So she goes to her father and he says, well, I think your brother was wrong. He's a very fine man. I think you should accept his love and make him happy. Maybe that will bring him back to his senses, because I worry much about our kingdom with no heir to the throne and the Norwegians threatening war. So how often we misperceive others and misperceive their actions. And in the midst of all of this, Hamlet must ponder his future. And in one of the most magnificent single sets of lines in all of literature, he asks the very central question of our whole course. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them. Like Seneca, like Boethius. Do you suffer these outrageous things that happen to you? Do you step back? Or do you take action? Should he suffer this outrageous chance that has occurred of his father being murdered, his mother committing incest and adultery? Or should he try to oppose them, knowing full well that to oppose them may die? But to die, to sleep, no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream, aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes? All those wrongs you have to put up with. All those people who cut you off at the freeway exit. Well, that's just one of the minor wrongs, but are you going to put up with it? Or are you going to go into road rage and chase them down? The bureaucrat who says this form is not filled out properly, you got to sit down and fill it out again to get your license. Or getting that license, maybe the state trooper says, you didn't stop at that stop sign. You say, but I did. Or do you just bear it and agree with him? Yes, sir, officer, I made a mistake. When he himself might his quietus make with a bared bodkin, just as Seneca said, you always have the way to freedom, in this case with a dagger. Who would fardels, burdens bear, to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country, from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience does make cowards of us all. So, you have the path to freedom, but you fear what might come after it. Then Ophelia comes to him, and she says, I realize you love me now. And he says, go to a nunnery. All of you women are untrue. You're all unchaste. The only way you'll keep good and pure is to go to a nunnery, so get thee to a nunnery. Get thee to a nunnery, I tell you. I want nothing to do with you. I will not allow you to play me false. So now he's crushed her. And his spurning her love does drive her crazy. She loses her mind, just like Werther. And she goes around the palace, mad, insane, singing strange little songs that she creates for herself. But in the meantime, Hamlet has decided to bring the action into full play. And there's arrived there at the castle a group of traveling actors. And he's seen them perform before. And he asked them, can you put on a play? Can you put on the play about the murder of the Duke that I saw you perform? Yes, we can. I would love to see you play. And if I write a scene for you, a few lines, can you incorporate it and put it on? Yes, of course, Prince. So he writes it out, Not So Mad Now, and tells his parents that he's arranged for this play to be put on. And they draw up, a banquet is given, and then the players come out. And in the course of the play, the king is lying there in the garden, asleep. And his brother, the rival, theme written by Hamlet, comes in and puts poison in his ear, and then weds the queen. And Hamlet asks his mother about it. What do you think about this play? And she says, I think that lady denying her guilt doth protest too much. Do you? I can't go on. Why did you have this play shown to us, son? Don't you like it, mother? I find it a wonderful play. I find it very true to life. What is this? The king says. Who gave orders for a play like this to be put on? Can't you see it's disturbing the queen? She rushes out of the room. Hamlet follows her. He's going up to the room to kill her. But as he's going, his uncle has already made his way to the chapel. Hamlet stops, and the uncle is there before the altar. And Hamlet says, oh, I can kill him right now. But his uncle is in the act of praying, confessing his evil, confessing his sin. Hamlet already has the dagger drawn, is going to go in and kill his uncle, when suddenly he says, no, if I kill him now, his soul will go right to heaven. He's got to die with that sin unconfessed, with a prayer on his lips. I'll save his life. That is the final evil to my father, to let my uncle go to heaven when he ought to burn forever in hell. So he goes on up to see his mother and begins to confront her. And as he is confronting her, there is a rustle behind him in the curtain. And he thinks it's the king who snuck up there to hear. So the king is away from the altar, and Hamlet draws his saber, and he's very good with his rapier, and stabs that curtain time and time again. But he hasn't killed the king. He has killed Polonius, who hasn't done anything. In fact, he's been like an uncle to Hamlet. And so Polonius falls out from the curtain, and he is dead, the first of these murders that Hamlet has committed. And he drags the body off to bury it. And then he demands that his mother confess to this sin. He's gotten to be a very dangerous person now. His uncle is coming up with various schemes to send Hamlet off to England. He's a disruptive force, wouldn't you say, in the kingdom? Yes, indeed. So he's going to send him off to England and get the king of England to dispatch Hamlet there. So the plot has gotten thicker and thicker. And the uncle, despite his will, the king, has been drawn into this plot of vengeance and death. Now poor Laertes comes home. And he learns that not only has his father been killed by Hamlet, but that his sister Ophelia, driven mad by Hamlet, has drowned. Whether she fell into the stream and was too mad to get herself out or killed herself, she's dead. So both his father and his sister have been killed by the action of Hamlet. Both of them entirely innocent people. And Hamlet now Learning of Ophelia's death, goes to the churchyard where the grave is being dug, but she'll have to be buried perhaps in unconsecrated ground. She's a suicide, it's being ruled. And so now he's sending her soul to hell. And he stands there and talks, jokes, and these are the scenes that Shakespeare puts in the middle of his play. The grave diggers who laugh and joke like jesters. They've done this many a time. They've buried many a person. They have long careers as grave diggers. And Hamlet ponders the bones that they're digging up. Why, that could have been a famous attorney who made a great deal of money in legal affairs. Perhaps he dealt in real estate. And now he's nothing but a skull. Yes, that's what we all come to, a skull. Ah, that skull. Yorick. I remember him well. He was my father's court jester when I was a little boy. He was a fool that could say to the king anything he wanted to. Why, I'd make him carry me around on his back. Oh, I have known him well, and kiss those lips that are now but a skull. Well, maybe that ought to be telling you that life is a transitory question, and that all the things you take so seriously in the end will not matter at all. But it's gone too far for that. Hamlet has to have his revenge, and Laertes has to have his revenge. And the king has to get rid of Hamlet once and for all. So he works together with Laertes to help Laertes avenge the dead Polonius and the dead Ophelia. And he says, I want you to go to Hamlet and say you will forgive him. But honor, a word that Shakespeare knows means nothing. Honor demands that you have at least one duel and make several passes at each other and draw blood, and then honor will be restored. And Hamlet is all too willing to do it. He deeply regrets the wrong that he has caused his friend. But this will be no fair duel. The rapier will be dipped in poison, the rapier held by Laertes. And a banquet is laid out, and the mother is invited down, and she's worried. She says, I don't want my son killed. I know he acts strange these days, but you cannot take him away from me. I love him too much. The king says, he won't be killed. They're just going to fight a duel. He's a very skilled swordsman. They'll make a few passes, draw a little blood, and honor will be satisfied. And then we can begin to get our son back sane again. And the duel begins. But King Claudius is not going to leave anything unchecked. He also has a big goblet of poisoned wine there that he's going to have Hamlet drink. So they began their dueling back and forth. They made one or two passes, and neither one is still injured. And the king says, Hamlet, why don't you have a little drink here? You know, you look awfully hot and flushed there. No, I want to finish the duel. I'll just have one little drink. No. Wine is wonderful. No. And the queen says, well, I'll have a drink. No! She throws it off. So he's poisoned her. It's queen. Oh, I begin to feel funny, dear. He said, oh, no. Stop the duel, but it's too late. They are now furious with each other. It's not a matter of honor anymore, but of hate. And all the hate that Laertes feels for Hamlet, who's done such wrong, boils up. And they begin to grapple hand to hand. And in the grappling hand to hand, one snatches the poisoned saber, the other grabs it. They fight back and forth. Laertes wounds Hamlet with it. Hamlet grabs it away and wounds Laertes, both having been struck with the poisoned point. And the king says, you are both going to die. And Hamlet, who now has the poisoned rapier, says, what, is it poisoned? Then you take it too, adulterer, and stabs the king, his uncle. And then, as the man is dying, grabs him, opens up his mouth, and pours the rest of the poisoned wine into it. Thou incestuous, adulterous, damned Dane. He dies. The mother has died. Laertes has died. The king is dead. And the Prince of Norway, Fortinbras, arrives at Elsinore Castle amidst this welter of corpses. And with his last breath, Hamlet has proclaimed Fortinbras King of Denmark. So he is the only way and one to profit. The older I get, the more I study Hamlet. I have no sympathy for him whatsoever. He is a deranged person who brought nothing but misery into the world. I'm going to give you a life lesson. You'll say it's simplistic. I think it's the best lesson you can have. Move on. Yes, he killed your father, married your mother. Leave it behind. You're not going to change a thing. And vengeance surely won't. I think that's what Shakespeare